And we're pretty kind of keen that would be the next thing we do, as in this is the forever career, if you like, cider making. Whereas we always knew that the restaurant was not forever.
Hello, my name is Ria Wincaller, and I am the producer and cider MC of this weekly podcast, where we speak with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world. Hooray! Bringing us into episode 441 of a Cider Chat with Sam Leach of Wilding Cider. Now, this cidery is based in Somerset, England. It's not too far from Bristol. The city of Bristol is really a hub in Somerset, and to the south, a little bit leaning to the west, southwest, I guess, is where the home orchard of Wilding Cider is located. They also have a cidery production barn, if you will, or facility in a different location, a number of different orchards, and they have been building up their stock list, their cider making technique, and really hit the ground running. So it's a really joy to catch up with Sam and the founders of Wilding Cider. I had, I was just fresh off the French cider tour. I landed in Bristol, basically hunkered down for a couple days at a one-room little B&B setup and stared out at some Druid ruins for the first day at least, to kind of take in what just happened in France with this amazing group of people who are on the French cider tour in 2024. I was already missing them, and it's a little bit of like, where's everybody doing? And, we do stay in contact. I love that. In fact, all the different cider tour groups stay in contact. It's great. But, you have a little bit of a longing at that moment. And I had a little bit of physical, dropping, because we had stayed up late at night and getting up, early in the morning, because I didn't want to miss a moment. I'm one of those people, stop talking. I don't want to miss anything. And then going over to meet both Sam and Becca and their two boys at their home orchard, in their home, having a sit down, super intimate. That evening I was able to enjoy dinner with them. After we were recording inside, Sam and I walked out to the orchard, then came back in and tasted some more cider. It was absolutely lovely, and you're going to hear the intimacy of it, because in the background, these little guys, right, their sons, were hanging out in the back. I kind of edited out some of it, but you're going to hear it. And that's the real deal. In cider making, and really in most of the fermentation world, there is often a very thin veil between home life and work life, because if you are orchard-based, if it's right there on your property, you don't have big bucks to have a huge mega tasting room somewhere that you hired other folks to manage, and you're only going in and kind of managing the books and the fermentation, then it gets really real. And that is part of the beauty of cider and Perry. They make both, and you're going to be hearing about that. This is a total geek out session in so many ways with Sam. We kind of get in there. I throw some hard questions out to him. He handled it like a pro. His baseline is as a chef, and you're going to really hear that in the descriptors on the label, and how he just talks about the cider making as we get further into the episode. So that was a really nice piece there on that conversation. And to boot, well, guess what? We're going to be visiting Wilding Cider, the home-based orchard, on the upcoming 2025 Totally Cider Tour UK edition. Hooray! Yeah, that's right. I'm going to be talking more about that. But before we get to this main conversation with Sam of Wilding Cider, let's first go to a little bit of words from some of the sponsors of this here podcast. I really encourage you to listen to it, because some of these audio ads that get plugged in here, it'll tell you a little bit how the algorithm is sensing who you are, which I kind of think is kind of good to know. And then some other news about CiderCon 2025 coming up in Chicago. CiderCon is the annual premier cider conference for industry professionals, and it's an opportunity to learn, share, taste, and network with other cider folks from around the world who work in every aspect of the cider industry. And coming up The next CiderCon is in Chicago. It's going to take place February 4th through the 7th. Now is the time to register. And if you haven't yet, you want to get it in. We're less than a month away, and you don't want to really miss this annual event. It is a place to get supercharged, network, and get those answers to those pesky little questions, maybe about fermentation, different styles, some of the legal issues surrounding cider, everything that you would want when you are in the midst of your cider work. So let me give you a couple tips. I would say arrive on Monday, the 3rd of February, so that on Tuesday, February 4th, you could take part in some of the tours, and there's still tickets available, which is incredible. So there's a chef-led pizza making class, and you think, oh, pizza making, well, what's the big deal? I do cider. Well, actually, in the UK, they are serving up a lot of cider and pizza because it goes really, really well together. And there's a lot of different sites here in the U.S., like Brooklyn Cider House. They always have some pizza making there. You should check those guys up in New York State. Anyways, so it's a chef-led pizza making class. This is, you could up your ante, maybe get some tips even if you're already making it. There's a field museum guide tour and happy hour. There's an aquarium tour and happy hour. There's a molecular mixology course. That's cool. There's a Raise a Glass, a celebration of diverse cider voices. And that's one that I'm going to. That's a dinner on Tuesday evening. I'm really excited about that. I'm going to see Hannah from Dope Cider House, Monique from Yonder Cider, Dave from Alma, which is based in Washington State. Love his ciders. Richard Yee from Brooklyn Cider House in New York. And also some cider from Casa de Ora in California. So, yeah, there's a lot going on there just at that dinner. So make sure you get tickets if you haven't. That's really the place to be. And I have a little tip. I'm going to give you a little tip because if you don't know about CiderCon yet, well, are you really in the cider industry? Okay, no, don't beat yourself up if you don't know about it. It's all good. Everybody's welcome. It's going to be a hell of a time. But here's a little tip as you are now starting to pack because you're getting ready, you're geared up. So first you're thinking, okay, let me make sure I'm registered. Oh, God, I got to register. So you're going to put in a promo code and get $30 off your ticket. And that promo code is CiderChat. The 2 C's are capital. It's all one word. Now you could click the box for the Cider Share because that money can go towards attending the Cider Share, which happens on Wednesday evening, starts at 5 o'clock. Don't miss that. It kind of comes out. There's always like little taste treats at the Cider Share, and you get to sample ciders from all your peers. It's an incredible experience. You'll have cups. You'll really be in the zone. All right, let me just say that. And my big tip for you is now as you start packing, think, do I have any electrolytes? And electrolytes help you avoid dehydration. So whether you're driving or you're flying, dehydration is an issue. And because we are professional drinkers in this industry, you want to watch out for that. So it's not just good enough to drink water. Not for me. I have electrolytes. And I'm going to have a little link in the show notes for the electrolytes that I really like. They're really tasty. I get it in orange powder or lemonade powder. Just pour it in a glass of water and I am good to go. So I'm going to be seeing you at CiderCon. Do let me know like what electrolytes you are using. I know sometimes I get some coconut water, but I have really been turned on to the powder form. And I have a really good brand, if you will, that I use. I can't wait to see you at CiderCon 2025. It's going to be taking place February 4th through the 7th in Chicago. It'll be Chicago Cider Week. And then on Saturday is Cider Summit, which is always awesome. It's going to take place at the Navy Pier. Yeah, good times ahead. So make sure you register at ciderassociation.org for Chicago CiderCon 2025. Walking through the orchards. We're going to be doing exactly that on the upcoming 2025 Totally Cider Tour UK edition. That's going to be taking place August 25th through the 31st. We meet in Bristol, which is to the west of London, and then we're going to be in Somerset. We're going to check out Wilding Cider, hang out there, enjoy their home orchard, and then doing some other site visits. All this is going to be going up at the Totally Cider page at ciderchat.com, but it's going to be early released to those on the wait list. And we have a nice sizable wait list. So, boy, I'm excited for that. Thank you for everybody who have sent emails this way. You could still get on the wait list. Let us know how many folks are on your party. Just send an email to info@ciderchat.com. Put Cider Tours on the top. Let us know who you are and how many folks. And this is to the UK. I have been getting questions about France. I know a couple of you would like to do that. Please let me know where you want to go, and we will keep on building that, because that's how I need to kind of manage all that. I'm sure you get it if you are in a business at any level at all and making plans for vacation. I need to have a sense of folks beforehand. Anyways, this UK tour is going to be outstanding. Somerset, Gloucestershire, and Herefordshire. And I'm really excited. We're going to be first starting in Somerset, and we'll be visiting, like I said, Wilding Cider. So without further ado, because I could barely contain my excitement, it just brings me right back to that day where I was kind of a little sleepy, a little out of it, and I got to meet Becca and Sam and the boys and hang out in their home and just have this really lovely time, this conversation, and drinking some really delicious cider, an amazing dinner, and walking in the orchard. So grab a glass and join this chat with Sam Leach of Wilding Cider, based in Chew Magna in Somerset, England.
First started renting it in 2018, and then we bought it a year and a half later. We sort of took the plunge on this orchard, renting it. So our background was in restaurants. Becky and I were running a restaurant, and we'd been making cider, and we were pretty kind of keen that would be the next thing we do, as in this is the forever career, if you like, cider making. Whereas we always knew that the restaurant was not forever. The farm got split into 3 lots, and we bought one lot of that, which included the cottage, which is sort of the old cottage there. This is obviously a new extension that we're building at the moment. And then bought the orchard, and then 2 more fields where we have forest garden and forest garden and vegetables, and we planted a little new orchard. So we've kind of, there's quite a lot going on this side.
You've got a lot going on, I would say so.
So
you can feel it.
It's like 7.5 acres here, and then we rent another sort of, I always slightly forget, it's about 8 or 9 further acres of orchard. Mm-hmm. So it's all traditional orchard, and other than the half acre of new orchard we planted, it's all established orchard. So it's been orchard for like at least 20 years or so, and some of them much older than that. So we're very fortunate to be in that position of having established orchards to take on with good, like mostly good cider fruit. Not always the varieties you'd want to plant, but mostly good stuff and productive. In some cases very run down and neglected. Probably replanted maybe 150 trees out of about 600, something like that. And then we probably top worked 50 or something across the orchards. And so that's really like trying to change the balance of the fruit that we have. Becky and I like acidity in ciders, so we like the bitter sharps, and we like the sharps to work with. You know, we're big fans of Kingston Black, Stoke Red, Porter's Perfection. So we kind of wanted to have those things, and definitely the kind of varietal split in the orchards is skewed very heavily to bittersweets. And so it's difficult to get that balance for us. Partly it's a taste thing, and partly it's a kind of fermentation thing. We need the acidity for the fermentation. We're working completely naturally, so that is a big part of our, you know, cleanliness of fruit and pH are kind of 2 big controls that we have, if you like, to make sure things stay safe and work out well.
I saw that you were taking down Bulmer's Norman. Bulmer's Norman.
Bulmer's Norman is one of the big ones that we've been
and the second one
eradicating.
Too.
Biscay or Michelin.
Okay.
It's not.
I was surprised with the Bulmer's Norman because you want to go more for the acid. So
yeah. But, I mean, we're in a very fortunate.
Some makers out there are listening to that right now, going, "Oh my God, he's taking down the Bulmer's Norman." Are you kidding me?
I'm sure.
But everybody has their own style, so that's
everyone has their style, and we're lucky that we have, you know, Dabonet, Chisel Jersey, Yarlington, Biscay, Ellis Bitter, Ashton Bitter, Ashton Brown Jersey. Yeah. So we've got probably, I don't know, 20 varieties of bittersweets. It probably represents 75% of our tonnage every year is bittersweets. In an ideal world, it would probably be about maybe 60, 30% bitter sharps and 10% sharps, something like that. But yeah, and of all the bitter sweets, Bulmer's Norman is by far my least favourite. I know some people like it, but to me it's just, it doesn't have much depth and complexity, I don't think, and I'm not a big fan of the style of tannin that it has. Basically, I think it's quite bitter and quite hard. If you're low on tannin, it's a great one to have, but we're not low on tannin, basically. So we're lucky like that. We are in the land of plenty.
It's so interesting to hear that, from someone from the UK wanting like more acid, and in the States, people want more of the tannin. And I don't know, maybe meet in the middle of the ocean, a beautiful world.
Do something in
Atlantis. What told you that cider was like the right direction? Because it's not an easy living.
No.
Restaurant work isn't easy either.
I would say it was probably quite gradual, really.
Okay.
So Becky and I both grew up in the countryside. Okay. Not as Becky grew up in Cornwall. I grew up in Somerset, so I didn't grow up far away from here, really. I grew up in Ditchett, and Ditchett's got great orchards, all traditional orchards. They're old orchards, and they are really, really beautiful. They're mostly owned by the Barber family, who make cheese. That's their business, really. But they've always kind of looked after all these orchards, and so for me, the orchards, there was no woodland, and I always loved trees. I loved woodland. Orchards became like my version of woodland as a child. I don't think Becky got into cider until later on, until she met me, probably.
Did you have it at the restaurant?
Yeah, we did. We always had good cider, but at the start we didn't have much good cider, and we got into drinking natural cider from farmhouse makers in Somerset. And when I became a chef and was getting into food and starting to get into drink, my opinion on cider was I wanted to drink wild juice cider. I didn't want it to have sweeteners added or sugar added. It had to be full juice. We started making cider as soon as we moved back to Bristol from London, just as a hobby, just with some friends. Every year we'd refine that, trying to get hold of some cider apples, then trying to find some actual orchards that we can go to ourselves and pick, and then trying to find better orchards, and we're still in that process of. So you're
kind of like foragers a bit. Is that true? Like when you like foraging for the perfect orchards, but not on roadside foraging.
Maybe that is fair. Yeah, that probably is fair.
Right?
Yeah,
because if that's not really possible in the UK to kind of forage the way that we would in the US, where there's abundant apple trees. I mean,
just growing
not overly abundant, but feral apple trees everywhere, and it's a whole niche scene part of cider.
Sure.
But here, it seems like there are kind of, would you say, feral orchards? Your orchard was like that, right? It was kind of left to.
Yeah, I mean, it was. So our orchard was being picked, and a lot of these were being picked. Some of them fully, some of them not fully, some of them not at all.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about abandoned farmland.
Okay.
We want to be growing the fruit, looking after the orchard, the whole deal, in a very sort of stable position. But when you don't have any land to start with, and you've got to find orchards, and you see one that looks good, but then you get in there and the varieties aren't suitable, or the trees are just not productive, or whatever the deal is, or the access is terrible and it's impractical, or it's just too far away, or whatever.
So your ciders are a blend.
Mostly,
Are you doing single varietal?
We do some, so we do Stoke Red, we've done Kingston Black. We always do those if we can. We've done quite a few single variety Perries as well, which I think generally the Perry pears are better suited to single varieties than the cider apples are, generally. So we try and do that if we can. But we really like doing single orchard ciders, so you're giving like a sense of what that orchard is like.
The terroir of that one single spot.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And it's always a selection. It's never all of it. It's always a bit of it. Now we're pretty settled in the orchards that we're working with.
So you're doing the regenerative farming here. You're making cider, and you're also an orchard, which is kind of like the whole shebang for a cider maker.
Yeah.
How has that learning curve been for managing orchards?
They've always been selected 95% of the time by farmers rather than plant breeders. And what's interesting about that is you're getting stuff that really works for a farmer, i.e. it's generally quite trouble-free, the skin is quite thick, they land on the floor okay, they're hard, they press nicely. If any of those things are wrong about an apple, there's got to be some very good qualities to be considered by a farmer growing.
right? They know it's going to work. There.
Yeah, because all these, these old farmers, when these things were being selected, they would have been milking cows, they'd have been making cheese through the summer, they'd have been making hay, probably growing some crops, definitely growing vegetables, and they would have also had apples and pears and plums and cherries for their household and the workers, and they would have made the cider themselves. So there weren't really many specialist growers, so you couldn't be like spraying neem oil or anything, you know what I mean, like that just wouldn't have happened. And so you get these varieties where the quality of the cider is good, they're relatively easy to grow in a very kind of low or zero input system. Relatively speaking, it's quite straightforward basically. I mean, in terms of like how we've learned, obviously we learned a lot from books, we learn from anyone we can meet and find out of. Sure. We haven't had a sort of mentor, and unfortunately in this region there aren't many, like specifically in our little bit of Somerset, there is not a huge amount of other orchardists and other cider makers. So there are a few. Is
that because they're 35 minutes away? I'm making a little joke here. Region-wise, I mean, you have probably like for me, like what I would consider a stone's throw away, that you have a lot of orchards.
Sure.
So what's a long distance?
So I'm meaning, I guess they're reachable, but in terms of within our literal region, like at North Somerset, so sort of north of the Mendip, south of Bristol, if you like. Yeah. There are other orchard cider makers, but there's not loads, and there's no one in our village. Or if there was someone in the village, maybe they would adopt you as a mentor. That sort of thing. Yeah. And really, you learn most of it from your own trees, I think. Sure. Because that's really the key. Is yearly pruning, watching how they fruit, how they respond to what you did last time, how the grasses, the variation from one side of the orchard to the other, the way that the same variety grows differently in different spots in the same orchard even, and between orchards. And but the trouble is they're only cropping once a year, they fruit once a year, so it's very slow to kind of learn anything in cider, really, I think. Yeah. But
that's the craft.
But that's the great thing about it. You couldn't get bored. You always keep learning and then keep improving.
Yeah, there's certainly an abundant number of apples to learn from. Yeah. I don't know if we'll ever meet them all. I'd like to talk a little bit about your cider. You're not adding sulfites, you're doing wild yeast. That's traditional in many ways. So what do you think really sets apart your cider making?
From other people's? Yeah. Oh, that's difficult.
Well, but also because it seems like you kind of hit the ground running and catapulted where people are like, dang, that's really fine cider.
We're very orchard first and cider house second. The planning of it is all done in the orchard, and it's all dependent on what the fruit is like, what the varieties are, have and how much we have of things each year. Last year we didn't do Kingston Black single variety because it wasn't good enough, I think, and also there wasn't a lot of it. So probably at the top of the hierarchy for us is the single varieties that we can do with those few varieties. Then it's the single orchards. Then it's the sort of stylistic ones, like we make one called Comics, which is a multi-orchard blend based around Browns, Dove and Yarlington Mill. And we make one called Symphony, which is pure bittersweet, so no acid fruit at all, and so on and so forth. But then you kind of have these sort of awkward bits. If you're a grower maker, you have to kind of do something with those, basically. And so that's where the spirits kind of started from. So that's the first thing. And the second thing about our cider making, I guess, is that we're quite purist about it. We don't use sulfites, it's only wild yeasts. We don't filter, we don't fine it, we wouldn't force carbonate, we don't pasteurize it, we wouldn't add enzymes to induce a kieve to it.
You're making kieve cider?
Occasionally only if it's a wild kieve. Yeah. In fact, it's more often happened with Perry. It's happened a few times with Perry's wild kieve. It happened a few times where you're like, I guess that's a brown hat, but never that brown hat and the complete clarity in that early stage sort of thing. We've sometimes had a mid fermentation where it just stops and keeves even though you've gone halfway through. A lot of that is really completely arbitrary. I'm pretty sure the ciders could be better if we did some of these interventions. Right. But the reasons we don't want to do them is that I think I've often had ciders that have been very interfered with, and I feel like they're really unenjoyable, basically, from a drinking perspective.
Yeah.
I don't think that sulfites guarantees a clean cider, for example. I don't think filtration guarantees elegance in any way. You can use these techniques well, and you can use the techniques badly. And so I think there's a real interest for me personally in like taking that very stripped back approach of kind of trying to do pure craft, and sometimes it won't work how you want it to. But when it does work, it is both personally extremely satisfying,
Absolutely.
but also I think like taste-wise it can taste great.
Well, it's a big investment, because if it goes wrong,
There's
and
an
you're
element
commercial.
of risk,
I mean,
for sure.
me, I'm an amateur
for sure.
cider maker for ages now, and if I lose 5 gallons, a little.
You can kind of accept it.
I'll still cry over that. But, I could accept it. But for you, it's your livelihood. So that's, I think, where it becomes the edge for folks to kind of step over. It's scary.
100%.
But if you're going to be wild, wild fermenting, you don't want to like introduce other cultures into your cidery, because that's going to, in my mind, it's going to be there now, right? It's very hard to separate that. And then they're kind of doing battle.
That's right.
And that's the beauty you're having, this like quality of cider. But also, I think you're spending time to allow it to age. So it's a year for aging. Do you often sit on a little bit longer than a year? Like, what's the average time then?
A minimum is a year. The average time is probably 18 to 20 months to start selling it. But we will sometimes sit on stuff for 2 or 3 years. Well, and so, like, sometimes we sat on stuff for 2 or 3 years and you think, I'm not sure I like this, and then we empty them all out and then send it for distilling or turn it into vinegar. And you've got to be, I guess, that you've got to take the rough with the smooth, haven't you? As any kind of maker, you've got to sort of accept that things don't always work out how you want them to.
So you're letting it go fully dry then?
Most of what we make, or a large proportion of what we make, has some residual sugar. And this is perhaps one of the things that it doesn't make us unique, but like we're in a relatively small group of producers who make naturally sweet cider anywhere, I suppose, relatively small. We call it the rural method. It is cold racking. I don't really like the term cold racking, just because there are quite a few people who refrigerate their tanks in order to do cold racking. We don't do that, and I really don't want to do that because it's very energy intensive. Like if you do a small scale, okay, fine, but when you're doing a big tank, it's vast amounts of energy to chill it to that extent, and we want to avoid that. And so the term rural method is kind of, for me, it's rural method.
Rural method.
It's a useful term to kind of distinguish this like natural cold purist approach to making cold rack cider.
So how do you? What is the rural method?
How do I define it?
Yeah.
So the method is basically it's a partially fermented cider. It's leaving you with some residual sugar. You're using the natural coolness or cold of the wind, and also unfertilized trees, extremely important unfertilized trees. You then have low nitrogen content, low amino acids, which gives you slow ferment. You allow the cider to get fermenting as normal and to grow a decent sized yeast crop. So you've got a decent amount of yeast in there, but that yeast is all quite young. It hasn't fulfilled much of its fermentation potential at this point. Because it's cool, it settles, and you get quite a sort of clear lees layer, and then we rack that cider into a fresh tank, leave the yeast behind, and you're leaving all the nutrients behind with it. So you're then making your cider lower in yeast cells and lower in yeast nutrients. So you even further inhibit the regrowth of the yeast. And if everything works out great, what happens is after the second racking, or sometimes after the first racking, it will slow to it'll almost stick in the winter, and then it will go clear.
Right.
And at that point, you've won, basically. Anything that we've done that's gone clear in the winter has always turned out good in the long time.
That's great.
But if it doesn't go clear, you don't quite know, because sometimes it doesn't go clear until kind of March, and then it will. And sometimes it doesn't go clear, and then it will speed back up in the spring. And we have done it where you just keep racking, and you rack 4, 5, 6, 7 times, and it eventually will stop, and you'll keep some sugar. But there's risk in that, because every time you're introducing oxygen, the more you rack it, that you end up stressing the yeast, which is something we really want to avoid. And then in the spring, we wait for it to warm up, and I think it seems to me that 12 degrees Celsius, I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, 12 degrees Celsius is the kind of key temperature. And once you're at that point, if you've got a lot of yeast, or if you've got active yeast, they will then speed up and just go for it, and then it'll go dry fairly quickly. Whereas if you get to 12 and you're stuck, or you're going below a certain threshold, which is like 2 points of gravity, so like 0.031 to 0.0329, if you do 2 points in 3 weeks, that is a good speed. If you're going faster than that, it may not hold, it may not be stable. If you're going slower than that, it will almost certainly not condition in the bottle, which we're quite relaxed about, as long as it's dry enough for
kind
our
of like
taste.
a pet nat.
Yeah, I don't mind whether it's fizzy or not fizzy.
So you're not really going for a pet nat, but if it happens, cool.
If it happens, it happens.
Yeah.
So basically, if you bottle it bright and it conditions and you get pet nat fizz, it very rarely will need disgorging. Obviously, if you bottle it with a bit of cloud and it doesn't condition, you then can't disgorge it anyway, but you've got that sediment. And we had in the early days I say the earliest, I'm sure that's going to happen again to us, but like that can happen, and that is very annoying to have a little bit of residual sugar and a lot of sediment in a thing you can't disgorge. And so what we have done is then empty it out into a tank, let it settle, and rebottle. So much work, so painful to do it.
Consuming.
But then when you've done it, you think, that was probably the right thing to do. You know, at least we can still sell it. People will still enjoy it. It's going to be a nice cider, just with way more faff. So that's the raw method, basically. So not filtering it. It's not being pasteurized in the bottle. You're not sulfiting it right at the end to freeze it or ensure it.
Exactly.
You know, and you're not chilling the tanks. So there's a few of us, like Skibery on the Welsh Heritage border. They coined the term rural method. We saw that and we thought, let's try and make this a thing. And so we checked in with them. And then Rob Stockley Cider, who he works for us, he's doing it as well on pretty much everything. He'll do a few dry ciders, but he's pretty much all going to be rural method. Art of Straw are doing it as well. They don't call it rural method yet, but I'm hoping to convert them.
It's nice to have that kind of like equilibrium with everyone, so that you have that common language. It's really important.
Well, that's the nice thing is because with cider, we always joke about this, but this is true. As a sort of cider maker making whatever you want to call it, fine cider, natural cider, ambitious cider, everyone has their term, but you're sort of convincing customers one at a time, literally one person at a time. You try it with them, you open their mind to it, then they're converted. If you say this thing you like is called rural method cider, then they see somebody else doing it, someone else doing it, someone else doing it. They just know immediately, okay, I think that might be my kind of cup of tea. And I think that's something that cider in the UK at least has been really bad at, is trying to establish a language, a set of terms that we all use that mean things, and then that helps the consumer no end. And I think, although in the world of wine there's loads of complaints about the system of appellation, but actually it has served the purpose. Like, that is why wine is the dominant gastronomic drink in the world, and it's because it's been incredibly well branded and incredibly well marketed and defined and
honed in,
established. And I
consumer.
think we could do with some of that in cider, really.
I absolutely agree. The racking, is it gravity?
No, pump. Yeah, pump.
I was just kind of curious about that, because there's a little bit of turbidity there, with the pump, and and I hear you're all about being a purist and sustainability. So I was kind of curious. Are they? Because I do know makers who do that for that very reason.
Yeah, sure. It's a combination of things. Ours is always on one level. We don't have a forklift.
Right.
If you're doing gravity rack, it's not okay just a gravity rack, is it? Right. If you're racking from some height, you're going to have loads of activity. You have to gravity rack extremely gently and carefully, and the hose diameter you use is going to affect it and everything like that. I don't know. I think the gravity thing is maybe overplayed. But I don't know. Maybe it's not, and it's hard to say.
Yeah.
No one ever does.
I was just wondering, could you,
do you know what I mean?
Introduce yourself as a purist? So that's kind of like the purest thing to me.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, it's only so pure I want to be, but
we don't have a horse to take the cider apples out in the orchard.
That's true. That's true.
And we do have stainless steel.
Yeah.
Although stainless steel is pretty pure, I would say, as in like it's extremely neutral. It's very easy to clean. It's modern, but it's very. Is
that primarily what you're using is stainless steel?
The cider for distilling we do mostly in IBCs, and we've got a few small plastic barrels that we use mainly for kind of storage of juice and like assembling blends during the season. So you put 200 litres or 400 litres or something aside in plastic, and then it goes later into stainless. I'd like to use more wood. At the moment we've only got 3 casks, wooden casks.
For conditioning or to ferment?
For fermentation. So usually this is not a rule, but usually they will have something go in for fermentation and come out at some point, maybe 3 to 6 months later, and then something else goes in for maturation. So they're always full. We never hold them empty for longer than a few days.
Right.
And we try and get 2 batches through every barrel in a year. Otherwise you sort of need to like take them out, get them off the groceries, clean the barrels and put the same thing back in, and then you need to have like somehow you've got to top them up with something, and all that just becomes like
full.
Logistically a bit of a pain.
It is.
But I'd love to be able to do a bit more, 20 to 25% of the output in oak would be really nice if we could do that. But
would that be a particular kind of oak?
So we haven't like used a whole range of stuff yet, really. I mean, we've used barrels from our Pommeau, which I really like. That's nice results. We've used some red wine casks. I really like the red wine casks actually, because they had something with quite a lot of alcohol, a lot of tannin. I find spirit casks can be kind of overwhelming for cider, especially for that first fill.
First that batch,
I think if you're on a bigger scale, it's much easier to use spirit casks because you can make bigger blends. But for us, it's difficult. It would be difficult, I think, for us to use spirit casks because the blend would end up being like quite big. Do you know what I mean? In total, even if it was just one cask, I might only want that to be like 15% of the blend, so that becomes quite a large blend to kind of utilise it. And then we've used a port cask. That was pretty wild. It's pretty full on. I really like that. That's a very traditional, port and sherry casks were very traditional in this area.
Do you do that at all with any of your spirits?
Cask aging. Yeah. So spirit wise, we are. The sort of inspiration was to make cider brandy. That was the aim, and that still is the aim. But then once you've got spirits, you like the world slightly opens up to you. So what doesn't go in the barrel can be sold as eau de vie. So that's what we've been doing. 2018 was the first eau de vie we did. So we've been doing that almost every year. We've had some eau de vie. With 1 year, I think we didn't have enough to do a release. Every year since 2019. 2019 cider was the first to go into cask to be a cider brandy, so that went into cask in 2020. So the first cask is coming up to 4 years old, and we've done 1 a year since then.
Fun. Is that kind of common here in the UK? Because
no, it's definitely uncommon in the UK.
Okay.
Definitely uncommon in the UK. But it's going to happen. It's the next thing I think in the UK.
Wonderful. That's music to my ears.
You've got the Templars, Somerset cider brandy, who were the first.
So well known.
And now, so other people, not necessarily doing cider brandy, but people working with apple spirits, having apples, having like cider distilled. You've got Gould's in Cornwall, Artistraw, Oliver's, Little Pomona. You've got Charles Martel. I'm sure I'm going to forget people. Once you kind of get into it, I think it like I say, it sort of opens up. And you're suddenly thinking, hang on a minute, if I've got a real glut here, I don't have to suddenly sell more bottles or suddenly sell more draft cider. I can just turn it into spirit, and then we can sell it whenever. And it becomes this sort of like insurance policy, savings account, pension, whatever.
Right.
That
and buy a whole estate with some of those barrels, and people have for sure.
And people have done. I mean, like Jérôme Forget in Normandy. I mean, he just started making Calvados and he didn't sell any for like, I don't know, 20 years, 30 years, something ridiculous. And he has this incredible library, and I think, I mean, we're not going to do that. We have to sell it because we need the money. But I love doing the spirits.
Yeah,
it's just,
that's fantastic to hear.
So much fun, and it's so exciting. And
are you doing a double distillation or a single distillation?
It's one go. It's a pot and column still, so it goes through. It's like a double distillation in one go. It's a modern still. It's in Bristol. It's a distillery called Circumstance Distillery.
So you kind of like contract distill in a way.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So like I mean, never say never, but with doing one cask a year, it's not. I don't think you could really justify buying a still.
Yeah, or probably doing the licensing too. It's a different license.
There is a load of that is another whole thing. Even just for aging it, that's another whole thing.
Well, let's talk about the cider.
There's a blend of the three varieties: 55% Davenet, 30% Browns, and 15% Chisel Jersey. It's from 2021, which was a year that I think was. It's hard to know because we haven't been going for long enough, really. But I feel like 2021 was a really good year for fruit. Because it was quite a lackluster summer, really. There was kind of a brief heat wave in July, I think, and then it was quite kind of grey and rainy-ish.
Yeah.
But then September was sunny and dry and lovely, and it was really good for fruit ripening. Generally, I think hot years give us lots of aroma, lots of tannin, lots of sugar. A very bold, kind of expressive fruit, and then the cool, wet years give you a much more delicate, poised kind of thing. And the thing I like about the cool years is a sort of freshness. And 2021, to my mind, had that combination of freshness and expressiveness. And I think of the Ditchet Hill blend that we do is the only thing we've done every single year since we started. And I think of all of those, 21 was probably my favourite. Just because it had that lightness and freshness as well as the kind of depth. Whereas like 2022, which is the one we're selling or just about to sell out of now, that is much bolder, much more tannic, much richer.
It's so smooth. It's so smooth for wild yeast. A lot of times you'll get a little bit of a stray, like maybe a little bit of the terroir in terms of barnyard or something. And here it's went through like a malolactic fermentation.
It will have gone through a little bit. So when I poured it, you saw that tiny. There's like it's not sparkling at all, but there is some gas to it, and that I think is mostly just from the malolactic. So there's a little bit of residual sugar. We would have bottled it in 2022, so it's been in bottle for about 2 years. That like in that first, I think it's done the malolactic this summer, so it's kind of second summer.
I say it's soft, but it's a complex cider. It's not super tannin. It's just really a smooth sipper. And the color, it's beautiful in the glass. It has that little bit of astringency that makes you want to keep on quenching your thirst. Just pull it on. And the ABV on this is
6.6.
6.6. So not super high, a nice medium alcohol by volume. Yeah, lovely. And the information you have here, I've been noticing on the back here on your label. I like how you say drink cool, not cold, with fish pie or Kirkham's Lancaster. So what is that? Is that a cheese?
Yeah, Lancashire cheese. Lancashire is one of the territorial cheeses of the UK. So one of the cheeses associated with particular areas. And it really almost completely died out, the tradition of proper farmhouse Lancashire cheese. So there is a sort of like industrial
manufacturers of it now. I'm sure you still can find it.
But the real deal is almost died out. But Kirkham's, the family, I don't know how many generations they're on, but they make beautiful Lancashire cheese and kind of always have done. It's not like super pungent. It's not super hard. It's sort of a bit crumbly and it's got a kind of like a bit of acidity to it.
Which would balance very well. The acidity would balance well with this.
That's right. And it's obviously got some fat, but it's not a super fatty cheese. But the fat works so well with the tannins and something like this. But this side, I think also is quite a good, like, either bread and cheese lunch cider or like a cheese course cider where you want it to go, because it's also quite nice with blue cheeses. It works well with cheddar, I think. It can be good with things like Caerphilly, which is another the territorial cheeses. Or Cheshire, or the Wensleydale's another one. It's nice with, and then it's also good with like because this is quite a sort of classic Somerset style in terms of the blend, it fits with like all the things that you would generally expect. You know, pork chops with applesauce. It'd be good with like casseroles, like Somerset pork, so cooked in cream with cider. Nice for all those kind of things.
I can see that.
Table kind of dinner cider.
It sure is. And it says on the label here, expect aromas of white peach, white grape, allspice, stewed strawberries, and star anise. Wow.
I know, it makes it sound good, doesn't it?
Yeah. That sounds like a meal right there. You got me on stewed strawberries. Wow.
We're kind of, with our labels, I'm kind of hesitant to put too many notes like that because I don't want to tell people what I think.
Yeah.
But it's nice to give them something. You need to give people something. I think the priority is to like let them know what kind of cider it is and like when they should be drinking it, basically.
Yeah.
Because what you don't want is like somebody just buy. We had this like early on in the business because with the first stuff we released was all quite sweet, fruity, rural method ciders, and then we released after a while like a bone dry, full tannin cider, which I really like, but it's definitely not a mass appeal type cider. It's something that like once you're into cider, you'd enjoy it. And we had a customer who really enjoyed our cider, and then they just like put that in the fridge, had it at probably like 3 or 4 degrees, and they were like, "This is horrible," basically.
No.
And you can understand it would be horrible.
Yeah, it would be too cold. Yeah,
And so we kind of realised kind of quite quickly that the key is you've got to sort of like guide people enough without telling them what to think. If you see what I mean.
Absolutely. And you know what? The stewed strawberries, I totally get it.
You get it? Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
It's like, what a great descriptive.
I think stewed strawberries is something that we get in kind of good years, I think. So Browns is bringing the acidity, and Browns is where the strawberry comes from. And Foxwell is another apple that gives you strawberry. And in like a hotter year, I've noticed we get more like stewed strawberry from the Foxwell and from the Browns. Or that sort of like gummy, sweety Haribo kind of strawberry, as opposed to like a very fresh fruit strawberry.
And also the white grape.
Yeah.
I think you have some really great qualifiers, and it does help, especially as folks are getting more used to talking about cider in that way. And again, that nice lowish ABV. It's a very simple label, nice font. It says Davenant Brown and Chisel Jersey. It says the rule method. You're getting it on there.
Yeah.
Still medium dry cider. And then wilding cider. It's simplicity with so much info.
Yeah.
It doesn't really tell the territory though.
So this
it does say Somerset. I'm sorry, it does. Yeah, you got it.
But this is a multi-orchard cider. So,
a multi-orchard.
So this is basically the Davenant and the Chisel Jersey are from here, from the home orchard, and then the Browns was from. Let me just think. I'm pretty sure the Browns was from Pepper Shells. So the small orchard in Compton Dando, which is a very nice orchard. Yeah, but this is sort of like the idea, I guess, is like some of the best Davenant and the best Chisel and the best Browns put together and blend.
No, and it's a beautiful, I guess, in the glass. Yeah, you're doing a nice job here. I'm very impressed. It's people think of wild yeast, and it could go in so many different directions. And what I am getting from your perry and your cider is something a little bit different because you're allowing it to age. So the yeast is not the ruling factor there. It's really the fruit that's shining through.
Yeah.
And the yeast just allowed it to like ferment, but it's not present and the lead role, which you wouldn't want it to be. You want it to be the fruit.
Yeah, that's right.
So bravo for that, because that is an edgy balance, right? When you're working with that very raw type of style of cider making.
Sure. I think you're right. You're totally right. The age is such a big factor.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I notice in this might sound, I don't want to sound like I'm being judgy, but if I try like other cider makers, like small people like us, basically, who are like relatively new to it and relatively small, I think the two most common problems that I think I can pick up on, one is the cider just being sold too young, and the other is that the fruit is not always as ripe as it could be. And I think that both those things lead to other stuff, and there's a lot of reductive ciders on the market. That's definitely a thing you notice is like reductiveness, and yet so often, especially with these tannic ciders, that goes with time. And actually, like, I think the mindset should be, if you have a bit of reductiveness, as long as it's not going across the line, actually that's a good sign for aging potential.
It sure is.
And I think, and then the other thing, like the ripeness, is like you can't age out unripe.
No, you can't.
Characters. If it's unripe, it's just unripe, right, and it will always be unripe.
Well, obviously, we just took the walk in the orchard, and you have these like different schedules of trees that you've planted and whatnot, and that kind of attentiveness and the fact that it's right outside the window of your home, you get to go for that perfect time. That nurturing. It's like grinding the flour and making the bread out of it. Or the beans stew that we had tonight. It's just perfect timing, and that's everything. That is it in a nutshell.
It's what we're always aiming for, although it's always difficult. It's always difficult to get perfect timing.
It is, but you have a better chance if it's right outside your window.
100%, yeah. 100%.
Unless life throws you a wrench and you can't get to it. But
no, definitely. I guess it's all about giving yourself the best chance possible, isn't it?
Yeah.
And like if you, this with so many varieties, and with making cider, and with perry, and with like staff. Everyone works fixed days, so you can't be like, oh, tomorrow we're going to do this.
Yeah.
You have to work around it. But it means that we can do as good a job as we're able to, basically.
It's a difference between an artisanal cider. Like, this is my experience. When you're able to go out and pick the fruit at that optimal time, that is like an orchard-based cider. That the Oldfield was like from a single varietal. Yeah. You're right next to that tree. You truly are.
That's right.
Especially with pears.
Yeah.
Is there any tips that you've kind of found with like working with the pears?
Yeah. So what have we? I mean, so I got to credit Tom Oliver, who has been like very open with advice, and also I've sort of read anything I can about Bartistry, who sadly aren't making cider anymore. They and Perry, they've retired, but they really were like exceptionally good at it. And so I've sort of followed what they basically said, which is more or less like you need to go to every tree every week at least once, but like ideally what you don't want to do is like go on a Wednesday and then go on the following Friday, so it's you want it to be no more than a week, really. And for most varieties, if you pick it up off the floor, it's ready to press. For most varieties, some need to be shaken. So like for us, that's yellow huff cap. It doesn't fall until it's gone too far. So you need to wait and shake, and because you're shaking, you can't take them one at a time. You've got to take the whole lot in one go.
Yeah.
So it's always a little. I find that a little bit stressful. We don't actually have any this year. It's in a way it's a relief. Even though it's my favourite variety, I absolutely love yellow huff cap. It's quite a stressful thing because you have to strike when you've got you want some bletted ones on the floor, you want the ones on the tree starting to blet, but you also want some that haven't bletted at all, so that you've got this, and some you want them almost all to be yellow, but with a few on the edge of green, I think. This is just my this is just observation, but so then you sort of waiting, so we'll visit that tree like multiple times a week, twice a week or something, and every time you shake a few down and you cut them open and look at them, and then when you're ready, it's like
go for it
and shake them out. And it's really difficult. You have to
you're able to
shake
these big trees.
You can only shake what you can shake. The
do
tops
you do like
you just
a stick?
Yes, we've got. It's not ideal. We've got 2 4-meter long poles, and we kind of tie them together, so it ends up being about 6.5 meters. And then you try and climb the tree and shake in the tree. We take the ladder. For next year, I want to buy like. You can buy this like fiberglass tree surgeon poles. They're really expensive, but they come. You basically just keep buying as many poles as you want to buy, and you just add them on the end. So then we should be able to get to like a 8-meter pole. But I think we need like a 9-meter pole for some of these trees.
Wow.
You still won't get to the top.
Wow.
So that's a kind of
that's the angel share, I guess.
And then I think bletting for us, like bletting of the pears is I think a really big factor. So we're looking for kind of about a quarter of the pears to be bletted, so soft and ripe, and it gives you just this like richness and kind of depth and complexity, which is just incredible. And yet you've got the unbletted pear, so you still have the acidity and the freshness and that like clarity of the kind of the unbletted. We macerate. We always macerate. We actually macerate everything as pomace.
Okay.
But the pears, I think, is particularly important for the pears. Like a lot of the apples, it probably doesn't make much difference if you go beyond like a couple of hours of maceration. But like with the pears, we macerate overnight unless it's warm. It's very warm, which sometimes, like last year in September, we had some real warm weather. So then we would kind of macerate in the mill it in the morning and then press it maybe 2 or 3 hours later. Because if it's too warm, you can get more, like you're more likely to get flies in there, and also like you get sort of volatility developing in that. That's the real worry.
That's a fear factor.
Is this like oxygen, pulp? You know, insects is the volatility. So then we want to press. But this year it's been very cool. Like every time, so we've pressed 3 lots of pear this year, and it's been cool. So we've done those overnight. And then basically we get it fermenting, and it always seems to kind of get going quite quickly, or not necessarily get going quickly, but like once it's going, it seems like it's fermenting quite fast. And then we rack it usually once. So this is for the raw method, like somewhere in the 20s, like 1020, you know, depending on what style, anywhere between 21 and 28 or something. And then usually it's usually pretty clear anyway, because press is clear, but then it just sort of drops out and goes crystal, and it just sits and does nothing all the winter. It's just it's mind-blowing how like it can be going fast. It seems like it's going fast relatively,
and then it slows down,
and it's just obviously just whatever yeast is on the bottom of the tank, and it's not even much sediment, you know, which is wild. You're looking at like in a big 1,000-litre tank, it's only like it's like less than an inch, half an inch maybe. And yet with some of the ciders, you know, you go in and like there's a couple of inches.
You would think thicker with pear, because sometimes pear doesn't clarify, you know. You
get these tannin hazes and stuff, which is kind of awkward. I think with the macerate, like when you're macerating, you have like some of the tannins bind to the flesh of the pear. It becomes a kind of mass, so you have sort of, it's actually really hard because it comes off and it's just like slop, but then it firms up and it separates, so we tend to get like a layer of pure juice at the bottom of the tub, and then we get this kind of floating mass on top, which you know, when you scoop in, you get like square sides, you know what I mean, like holds it together.
Chunky.
And so I think that's the process of my understanding is very weak, but I think what it is it's basically like the less ripe pears, so the ones that haven't bletted at all, with this they have more tannin, it's more reactive tannin, and then it's sort of much more binding together, and you get this sort of, it is kind of like a clarification basically. And then
which is what you want.
That's it really. I mean,
you let it kind of go just go through the winter, steady go, and then
we'll bottle it in the spring.
You bottle in the spring
or early summer, depending. Okay. It depends. Like with some of the perries,
do you rack it off of that?
So we just rack for always bottling.
Racks do you do?
So that would be one racking in the winter, and then one.
So 2
at bottling point. Yeah.
Not much.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it can be really quite effective. So last winter, I think it's too early to tell you how this worked, but we did one that we wanted to be sparkling, properly, a bit more sparkling. So we didn't rack it at all, and we bottled it at 1012 because we found basically we haven't had any perry ferment below 1008. So that's, you know, obviously there's an element of sorbitol and there's an element of residual fruit sugar, and I think we don't have the means to test that. But it feels like that's where it wants to stop. So we're thinking bottle it at 12. Hopefully we're going to get enough gas to disgorge. That's the plan.
Yeah.
So after Christmas, we will kind of visit that cider and visit that perry and see what happens with it. And hopefully we'll get it on the racks.
And I think if you're letting people know that's a wild ferment and all that, then they have a more leniency of how it looks in the glass too. Would you agree with that?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, that's part of the excitement because it's a living food.
Yeah.
Really, it's a liquid living food. And that, is exactly what you want when you're eating. You want some kind of health in it. Though, I know you as a cider maker may not be able to say it, but I will say it. It's a living food. There's yeast in there, and that's a pretty darn good drink.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes it interesting as well because it really does age.
Yes.
Because not just chemically but biologically it's aged. It's got lots of processes happening, which then gives you it's a lot to be interested in. And I think, I guess the challenge is when you're selling stuff, especially when you're trying to sell further afield, not just at a market or something face to face is one thing, but when you have somebody else selling it for you in a shop or in a restaurant or something, they need to know what they're talking about as well. And because a lot of it is about confidence, basically. If a customer says, "Oh, this looks a bit cloudy," and then the waiter says, "Oh God, yeah, sorry, hang on, I'll check on that," then you're like instantly the customer's like something's really wrong.
Yeah,
whereas if the waiter's able to say, "Oh yeah, no, don't worry at all, it's unfiltered, it's from a natural producer, and it's the cloudiness is just part of the thing," and they can explain it's a tannin haze or it's whatever it is,
education,
and it won't affect. So that education is important. But I guess a lot of that is people can transfer it over from wine if that what they know about natural wine can apply to cider as well, about how about all those things about tannins and about fermentation and aging and stuff. There's a lot of crossover, so it's just about getting to people to understand roughly how that works.
How it works. So I'm kind of curious, where can people get your cider?
They can get it, they can come to the farm. They're very welcome to come here to buy. We do an open day once a month, the second Saturday of the month. From April through to September, we do an open day. We always have stuff to taste on the open days. And then people can bring a picnic and just hang out in the orchard.
Lovely.
Buy a bottle and we'll lend them some glasses.
Fantastic.
Have a drink. And then, you can buy lots of, like in the UK, we tend to sell to independent bottle shops and to restaurants and sometimes to pubs and sometimes to bars, like wine bars.
Are there some bars in Bristol that they might be able to find it? Or shops?
Bristol, Corks of Cotton, Corks of North Street, Native Vine, I'm sure I'll forget somebody, Grape and Grind, the North Street Cheese Shop, and there's definitely a couple of others, so I apologise if I've forgotten you. And then restaurants, Marmo stock some of our stuff, Bullrush, Wilson's, Bertha's Pizza, Root, and then further afield, so we distribute via the Fine Cider Company in London, so they can supply nationwide to the trade. They have a shop on the weekends in London Fields now in East London, and then there's lots of other obviously independent places. They do online, and also the Cat in the Glass, based in Manchester, so they stock our stuff online. Good. Mickey's great, doing a great job there. Able in Scotland, and then various other people who are supplied.
So primarily
directly.
The United Kingdom?
Yeah, primarily, and then in Belgium via El Cider.
Oh, nice, a cider brand.
And Cecile, who are really lovely distributors.
Good.
And then in Japan via, I'm going to embarrass myself if I try and pronounce this, via Hohokabe Shuten Limited. So they are a kind of, it's like a family business. They were a sake brewery and a bottle shop and bar, and they import mostly craft beer and some cider.
Okay.
They're really cool guys. And in China via, again, I can't remember the name of the company. It's embarrassing, but yeah, it's very minimal distribution. It'll be minimal distribution in China. But that was cool. Yeah,
that's really huge.
That was quite a learning experience, big time, going to China, because with Belgium, obviously we're not in the EU anymore, sadly.
Yeah.
But most of the procedures, I think, are roughly the same as they were, so it's not that complicated. And actually, Japan felt relatively, they dealt with it. But for China, there's loads more we had to do for the Chinese government. We had to register with the Chinese government as a food producer and then send them environmental health inspection reports. So we had to make loads of documents.
Oh my goodness.
And we had to buy a stamp, our own. That's really funny. maybe I shouldn't say this in public, but we had to like make a stamp, like an official stamp, and then stamp our own documents. I guess in a big company that makes sense, but when it's just me and Becky,
right,
writing the documents and stamping
it
feels a bit funny. But yeah, that I mean that's cool, and I think we've had other interest in terms of export. We have sent actually a little bit has gone to the US via Ancho in Washington.
Okay. I imagine people after listening to this conversation are going to be behind your door.
Yeah, hopefully send us an email.
Or come over on the cider tour and we'll just drink it out in the orchard. I think that sounds like a very good idea to me.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, look, I really want to thank you for dinner.
Oh, that's a pleasure. That's a pleasure.
Chit-chatting and just bring me into your life here and showing me what you're doing. It's quite exciting, and I think you're spot on here. You're really
good.
You're really
thank you. It's nice to hear.
It's exciting.
Yeah, very happy to have you come and visit. Thanks for coming.
Find links to Wilding Cider and all the mentions in this here episode 441 of Cider Chat by going to ciderchat.com, and make sure while you're online to sign up now for the wait list for the upcoming Totally Cider Tour UK edition for this year 2025. And with that, I leave you here. This is Real Wind Caller signing off for now. Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville.
We like cider, we like palms, we love orchards and having fun. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Oh yes there is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. We like cider, we like palms, we like orchards, having some fun. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. Oh yeah. We like cider. Oh yes we do. We like palms. Oh yes we do. We love orchards, having some fun. There is a reason why we do it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. There is a reason why we do it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. Ba-da-da-dum. We like walking down the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. Oh yeah. We like cider. Ba-da-da-dum. We like palms. Oh yes we do. We like orchards, having some fun. Yeehaw!